Hi guys, it's nice to see you again. So today this lesson is going to be on calculating the circumference and area of a circle. So just for a quick reminder, circumference is the line distance around the outside of the circle, and then area is actually the painted distance or the coverage amount if we covered the entire circle. So as we're moving through these, my expectation is that you're watching the videos. And as you're watching the videos, any of our slides that have a notebook in the corner that tells you that you need to write that in your notes. And then also any of the practice problems that we're working out, I strongly suggest that you write in your notes. You can pause the video at any time, you can back it up, you can play it again, and you can take your time to go through it. So a quick reminder here, we talked about circumference. Remember, the circumference is the distance around the outside of a circle. The diameter is a segment that passes from one side of the circle to the other through the center. And then the radius is a segment that passes from the center of the circle to the edge of the circle. And if you remember, the relationship between diameter and radius is that the radius is 1/2 the length of the diameter. The next one, we'll be talking lots about pi when we start talking about circles. Pi is actually defined as the ratio between the circumference of a circle to its diameter. Pi is an irrational number, which means it does not end. We continue dividing it out and we don't find a repeating pattern. Usually though, we can either leave pi as the pi symbol, or we can also round it to be 3.14. And for us right now, 3.14 is a reasonable estimation of pi. Now in your notes, you don't have to write down all of the digits of pi in the graphic here, but you should definitely practice drawing that symbol if you're not used to it. Next, when we talk about the circumference of a circle, we're talking about the distance around the outside. And we have two separate formulas that we can use for that. Let me slide myself out of the way here. So when we're looking at circumference, we can either use the circumference equals pi times the diameter. So in order to get that blue outside length, we're going to take the diameter and multiply it by pi. Or we can also, since the diameter is twice the radius, we can also find the circumference by taking the radius times 2 times pi. So either way that we accomplish that, both of those will give us the same answers for circumference. We should look next at the area of a circle. So when we're looking at area, we again remember are going for the coverage area here. So in order to find the area of a circle, we take the product of pi and the square of the radius. And we often write that as area equals pi times the radius squared. Remember that squared symbol means you're going to take the radius and multiply it by itself. And then even when we don't write the x in between the pi symbol and the r, remember that if they're written next to each other, those two numbers are multiplied by each other. And then kind of a comparison between the two. This is a nice little graphic that I thought you guys might like. Notice there's no notebook symbol here, so you don't have to draw it in your notes if you don't want to. So it is cherry pie is delicious. So circumference is pi times the diameter. And then apple pies are too. So we have A for area equals pi times the radius squared. And that caret means that it's an exponent. Raise it up to an exponent. That symbol there is called a caret. So that's a nice little reminder for you to remember the different formulas for circumference and then also for area. Then lastly, I always like to end out these PowerPoints on a quick little math joke. So you'll notice here, Jim the circle is really spending a little too much time thinking about his circumference and where it came from. So that should be the end. You should be able to have all of your notes in your book from your notebook. Thanks, guys. Guys, so we're back here to work on a couple circumference problems. So you can see we've switched over to our math whiteboard. I did like to bring over my little sticky note here, which is nice to have. It reminds me of my three formulas for circumference is pi times the diameter, or circumference is 2 pi times the radius. And lastly, we could also have our area formula here, which is pi times the radius squared. I'm also going to add a little note on there that pi is about equal to 3.14. So we have a nice little sticky note down there on the bottom. So I'm going to set this aside, and when we look at our next problem, we can read our setup right here that it asks us to find the circumference of the circle using 3.14 for pi. Since we are looking for circumference, we want to go through and choose one of our two formulas for circumference. When we look at our circle, we can see that we have the diameter of the circle that's given with the area, or excuse me, the length from one side to the other. So we know that our diameter is 13 meters. So when I'm choosing these two formulas, I can choose the formula that has circumference and diameter together. So I'm going to rewrite my formula. C equals pi times the diameter. Then I'm going to go ahead and plug in and go from there. So C equals 3.14, which I can substitute for pi right there, times the diameter, which is 13. So I want to multiply those two out. There's a couple ways I can do that. I could use my calculator, or I could also multiply it longhand. When I multiply those two together, I'll find that my answer gives me 40.82. And since this is in meters, then we're also going to put meters on our answer. So the circumference of this 13 meter diameter circle would give us 40.82 meters. So I have our second practice problem for you today. This one says to find the circumference of the circle using a calculator's pi key. So what we're looking for on this one that's a little bit different is we're again looking for circumference, but we're going to use that pi key instead of the 3.14. So when we take a look at our circle, we notice that we have a 5-foot radius on the circle. So in choosing a formula, I want to choose a formula that relates the circumference with the radius. So I'm going to use this one. So circumference equals 2 pi times the radius. It's going to be our formula for this problem. I'm also going to slide my calculator over here so that you guys can have a look at it. I think you can read it right about there. So for circumference, we're going to fill in circumference equals 2, and then we're going to keep pi there. I'm going to put a little dot in between them to separate them. And then we're going to put in our radius, which is 5. So I want to go ahead and take my calculator and turn it on. I'll clear out anything that's there. And I want to go 2 times pi times 5. And that will give me my answer of 31.4159. Now that gives us a lot of decimal points, but what we want to do is just go ahead and round to 3 or 4 decimal points. We'll go ahead and take all the ones that are on there. So my circumference on here is 31.41592654. Remember, since pi is irrational, it doesn't have an end to it, that number will continue going, but my calculator rounds it off for as many digits as what we have. Good job, guys!